In the mail, probably. I don't know, sir. Just send somebody up here real quick.
Okay. Are they awake?
I have no idea.
Are they breathing?
I have no idea. I'm not inside the house.
Gene Hackman was a man of few words, but 2 weeks before his death, he said something that could shake Hollywood forever. For decades, Hackman was a towering figure in the film industry. With 2 Academy Awards and a career spanning over 40 years, he was widely regarded as one of the greatest actors of his time. But unlike many of his peers, Hackman didn't bask in the spotlight. He walked away from it. In 2004, he disappeared from Hollywood without a grand farewell, without a final project, without explanation. Fans assumed he was simply retiring to enjoy a quiet life, but those who looked closer saw the cracks. He refused public appearances, avoided interviews, and rejected every attempt to pull him back into the industry. Hollywood called, but Hackman never answered. Because for Hackman, Hollywood wasn't just a place of glitz and glamour, it was a machine, one that operated in the shadows, where power was traded behind closed doors and where silence was often the price of survival. Over the years, other actors have hinted at the dark underbelly of the industry. Some spoke in whispers, some vanished altogether. Then, just 2 weeks before his death, Hackman broke his silence.
Are you with the patient now?
I'm sorry?
Are you with the patient now?
Yeah, I'm over at their property. There's no address here. So I have to meet the ambulance or the police, whoever, down at the gatehouse.
In a late-night phone call to a close friend, he confessed to something he had carried for decades, a truth he couldn't take to the grave. But what did he reveal? And why did he wait until the very end to say it? What Gene Hackman knew could change everything. Before he vanished from Hollywood, Gene Hackman was a name that carried undeniable weight. He wasn't just another actor, he was a legend. With his commanding screen presence, rugged authenticity, and a rare ability to disappear into his roles, Hackman delivered performances that left a permanent mark on cinema. His breakthrough came in 1971 with The French Connection, where he played the relentless detective Popeye Doyle, a role that won him his first Academy Award for Best Actor.
And there you see part of a performance that's typical of Gene Hackman's greatness as the kind of actor who can convince us of the utter authenticity of his characters.
Critics hailed his raw, unfiltered portrayal, and suddenly Hackman was no longer just a supporting actor, he was Hollywood's leading man. Throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, he built a career that most actors could only dream of. The Conversation, Superman, Hoosiers, and Mississippi Burning. Each film added to his reputation. Then came Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's revisionist western, which earned Hackman his second Oscar. It was the ultimate validation of his talent, proving that he wasn't just a star, he was one of the greatest actors of his generation. For a while, he played the game. He attended premieres, accepted awards, and mingled with Hollywood's elite. But those who knew him best saw that Hackman was different from other A-listers. He never craved the spotlight.
The line's long for the great actors I've been able to work with, really is. But I would say probably Gene was the best actor that I'd ever worked with. And at one point they were saying, well, what's Gene going to do? And I said, Gene will figure out what to do. Because he's really good. Gene will figure out what to do.
He wasn't interested in fame for fame's sake. Then something changed. By the late 1990s, Hackman had started pulling away. He turned down invitations to industry events. He skipped award ceremonies, even when he was nominated. He rejected roles that other actors would have fought for. It was as if he was slowly erasing himself from the industry that had made him famous. And then, in 2004, he was gone. Without any grand farewell, without a retirement announcement, Hackman walked away from acting entirely. One day, he was one of Hollywood's most respected stars. The next, he had vanished into the quiet landscapes of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It wasn't just a career shift, it was a complete severance. He stopped giving interviews. He refused to appear at retrospectives or reunions. Directors, journalists, even longtime colleagues struggled to get in touch with him. Unlike other retired actors who still relished the occasional public moment, Hackman wanted nothing to do with the industry he had once ruled. At first, people assumed he was simply tired of the business, that after decades of grueling productions and relentless attention, he had earned his right to disappear. But the deeper you looked, the more questions surfaced. Why did he cut ties so completely? Why did he refuse even honorary awards? And why did he, a man who had once lived at the heart of Hollywood, seem so determined to stay as far away from it as possible? Was Hackman simply done with acting? Or had he seen something so unsettling, so corrosive, that he couldn't be a part of it anymore? For years, the mystery remained unsolved, but in the final days of his life, Hackman himself may have given us the answer. For most actors, winning an Oscar is the ultimate achievement, a golden validation of their talent. But for Gene Hackman, it was just another illusion. As his career soared, he became increasingly disillusioned with Hollywood's inner workings. The smiles at award shows were rehearsed, the praise was conditional, and the deals were rarely about art. Behind every handshake was a contract, and behind every award, an agenda. Hackman wanted no part of it. He never campaigned for awards, never lobbied for recognition. In an industry where Oscar victories were often determined by backroom deals and strategic PR efforts, Hackman's refusal to play along made him an outsider. He rejected the Academy's politics, declining invitations to exclusive gatherings where industry elites decided the next big thing. While other actors gained favor with producers and executives, Hackman remained distant, respected but never fully embraced by Hollywood's power brokers. But his defiance didn't stop at awards. By the late 70s and early 80s, Hackman began turning down lucrative roles, not because of artistic differences, but because of conditions. Some scripts came with unwritten requirements, private meetings with executives, social appearances with powerful figures, and vague contracts that extended beyond acting. Hackman refused them all. Then there was the French Connection. Filming the 1971 crime thriller was a career-defining moment for Hackman. But behind the scenes, something happened. Something that changed how he viewed Hollywood forever. During a late-night shoot, Hackman overheard a quiet conversation between a producer and an unknown figure. He couldn't make out every word, but the message was clear enough. Actors were not discovered, they were chosen. Careers weren't built on talent alone, they were orchestrated. The biggest roles, the most prestigious awards, the sudden rise of new faces. It was all part of a system few were meant to understand. Hackman was stunned. At first, he dismissed it as paranoia, but the more he observed, the more patterns he saw. Young stars who played the game rose quickly. Those who resisted faded away. A carefully controlled machine determined who thrived and who vanished. The next morning, he confronted the producer, but instead of an explanation, all he got was a smirk and a dismissive pat on the shoulder. That was the moment Hackman truly saw Hollywood for what it was. From then on, he became even more withdrawn. He avoided closed-door meetings. He refused to mingle at private events where unofficial deals were made. And, most importantly, he started keeping records. By the 1980s, Hackman had developed a habit, one few knew about. Whenever he took a phone call from a producer, an executive, or a fellow actor discussing an industry deal, he recorded it. At first, it was just to protect himself, to ensure that no one could twist his words or pressure him into agreements. But over time, his collection grew. Secret negotiations, veiled threats, hushed conversations about controlling public perception. Hackman captured it all. It's unclear exactly how many tapes he kept, but those close to him claim it wasn't just a few stray recordings. It was a lifetime of evidence. Evidence that could expose how the industry truly operated. But if Hackman had this proof, why didn't he use it? Why did he keep it hidden? Some believe he was waiting for the right moment, a time when he could reveal it all without facing consequences. Others suspect he knew what would happen if he ever spoke out, because in Hollywood, some secrets weren't just dangerous, they were deadly. Gene Hackman had spent decades keeping his silence, but 2 weeks before his death, something changed. His closest friend, a man who had known him for years, received an unexpected late-night phone call. It was rare for Hackman to reach out. He had distanced himself from almost everyone, cutting ties with Hollywood and retreating into his private world in Santa Fe. But what he said next was unlike anything he had ever shared before. For the first time, Hackman spoke about why he left Hollywood so suddenly. It wasn't just disillusionment. It wasn't just a distaste for the industry's politics. It was something much darker, something he had witnessed firsthand, something he had buried for decades. And now, at the end of his life, he couldn't keep it buried any longer. Hackman's voice was hoarse as he recounted the night that had haunted him for nearly 50 years, a night in the mid-1970s when he was invited to what he thought was just another Hollywood party. It was held in a sprawling Beverly Hills mansion, the kind where only the most powerful names in the industry gathered. He had been reluctant to go, he never enjoyed these gatherings, but a trusted colleague had insisted. It would be good for his career, they said. It was an opportunity. At first, it seemed like any other elite gathering. Famous directors, producers, A-list actors, expensive champagne, laughter, conversations about upcoming projects. But beneath the surface, there was something else. A tension in the air, a sense that what was happening behind closed doors was something very different from what was happening in the grand hall. And then Hackman saw it. Behind a velvet curtain, away from the main party, was a private room, a place where only a select few were allowed to enter. What he saw inside shook him to his core. It wasn't just an elite social club. It was something far worse. Something criminal, something that involved young victims, powerful figures, and a level of corruption that went beyond anything he had imagined. This wasn't just about money or influence, it was about control, about an industry built not only on talent, but on silence and compliance. Hackman stood frozen in the doorway, unable to process what he was seeing. He wasn't supposed to be there, and the moment someone noticed him, he knew he had made a mistake. The next day, he received a message, a warning. He wasn't the first actor to stumble upon something like this. Others before him had seen too much, and they had either learned to stay quiet or disappeared entirely. Then came the ultimatum, sign an agreement, a non-disclosure pact that ensured he would never speak of what he saw. In return, his career would continue, his life would remain untouched. If he refused, he would be erased. Hackman wasn't a fool. He knew there was no fighting back, not alone. He signed the paper knowing that if he didn't, he wouldn't just lose his career, he could lose everything. But he never forgot, and he never forgave himself for staying silent. For decades, Hackman tried to move on. He distanced himself from the industry, turned down projects, and eventually walked away altogether. But he never stopped collecting evidence. His secret recordings, the tapes he had been making since the 1980s, became his insurance policy. He recorded everything: conversations with producers, private calls with executives, moments when powerful figures let their guard down. If anything ever happened to him, these tapes would be his way of exposing the truth. And as he lay in the final days of his life, he knew he couldn't take them to the grave with him. Then he did something he had never done before. He told him the names of the people who had been at that party, the people who had protected them, the people who were still, to this day, untouchable. Some were still household names, others had faded from public view, but their influence remained. The industry had silenced others before. It had buried stories, erased careers, and rewritten history. Would his confession be any different? That phone call was the last time his friend ever heard from him. 2 weeks later, Hackman was gone. The official cause? Natural causes, a quiet death, just like his quiet retirement.
There is no surveillance as we know of right now in the interior of the residence or the exterior of the residence that is going to help us determine a timeline or events that happened. An autopsy was performed. Initial findings noted no external trauma to either individual.
One else. His tapes, the recordings he had safeguarded for decades, vanished. No one knew who took them. No one knew if they were destroyed, hidden, or if someone out there still had them. But one thing was certain: Whatever Gene Hackman knew, he wasn't supposed to reveal it.
The first thing that seems to have been ruled out multiple ways, but again, the animal can help, was the possible carbon monoxide poisoning.
And now the question remains, did his confession die with him? Or is there still someone out there who holds the key to Hollywood's darkest secret? Gene Hackman's death was supposed to be the quiet ending of a long and remarkable life. A man who had spent decades in the public eye had chosen to live his final years in solitude. But after the news of his passing broke, something strange happened, something that raised more questions than answers. His Santa Fe home, the place where he had lived in near isolation, suddenly became the center of attention, not from fans or the media, but from unidentified individuals who arrived before anyone else. They didn't bring flowers, they didn't come to mourn, they came for the tapes. For years, those close to Hackman knew about his secret recordings. He had never spoken about them publicly, but those who visited his home had seen the collection, a worn leather suitcase tucked away in his study, filled with old cassette tapes and labeled recordings. Hackman's cousin, who lived nearby and often checked in on him, later confirmed the tapes were there just days before his death. But when police arrived to secure his home, they were gone. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, just empty shelves where the recordings had once been. Someone had taken them. The question that followed was who had the most to gain from their disappearance. There were three leading theories. Some believe the tapes were confiscated by powerful figures within the industry, the very people Hackman had recorded. If those recordings contained names, conversations, or deals that could expose a long-hidden power structure, then getting rid of them would have been the highest priority. After all, Hollywood had buried scandals before. Others speculate that Hackman had already taken precautions, that he had given copies of the tapes to a trusted journalist or investigator before his death. If true, this would mean the recordings still exist, waiting for the right moment to be released. But if that's the case, why hasn't anyone come forward? Then comes the most unsettling possibility. The tapes were destroyed. Someone got to them first, ensuring they would never see the light of day. If so, then Hackman's last attempt to expose the truth may have been silenced before it could even begin. Some argue that there's nothing suspicious about the tapes disappearing, that Hackman, in his final days, may have simply disposed of them himself, perhaps realizing that revealing the truth would change nothing. But those who knew him don't believe that. Why? Because Hackman had spent decades holding on to those recordings. If he had wanted them gone, he could have destroyed them at any time. Instead, he kept them safe, even in complete isolation. And then, right after his death, they vanish. That's not a coincidence. That's control. Rumors continue to swirl. Some believe copies were made, hidden away, waiting for the right journalist, investigator, or whistleblower to release them. Others say Hackman ran out of time, that he had planned to reveal everything but never got the chance, that the last proof of Hollywood's darkest secrets was lost forever. And yet, there's always one lingering question. If someone out there still has the tapes, why are they staying silent? Because in Hollywood, some secrets are never meant to be told. Why does any of this matter now? Because Hollywood has always been built on carefully controlled narratives. Scandals have been buried, careers have been erased, and those who speak out are often met with silence, or something far worse. The industry has survived leaks, allegations, and shocking exposés, yet the machine keeps running, its power untouched. If Hackman's tapes were ever found, it could change everything. For years, whispers of Hollywood's darkest secrets have been dismissed as conspiracy theories, rumors without proof. But if the recordings still exist, they could be the undeniable evidence that forces the world to finally confront the truth. A truth that some have always suspected, but few have dared to investigate. But would it even matter? Hollywood has endured every revelation thrown its way. Scandals that should have dismantled careers, lawsuits that should have brought accountability. All of it eventually fades, replaced by the next blockbuster, the next award season, the next distraction. The question isn't just whether the tapes still exist, it's whether, even with proof, anything would change. Gene Hackman spent his final years in silence, but his last words left behind a haunting question. Was his death truly peaceful, or was he silenced before he could expose the truth? The tapes that could have changed everything vanished without a trace. The people who may have been exposed remain untouched. And Hollywood, as always, continues moving forward, as if nothing ever happened. Maybe the tapes will surface one day, maybe they won't. But one thing's for sure, Gene Hackman knew the rules of Hollywood, and he knew what happens when you break them. What do you think? Do Hackman's tapes still exist, waiting for the right moment? Or is Hollywood too powerful to ever let the truth come out? Let us know in the comments.